So would you like to just introduce yourself and just tell our listeners what you're about and who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Dan. It's lovely to meet you.
You too.
Um, so my name's Ruth Chiles. I am a brain spotting consultant. I'm also a writer. I have written two books on brain spotting and performance blocks. And I'm also a musician, so I play the flute.
Okay.
And come from a history of having very severe performance blocks, which is sort of where a lot of my knowledge within this comes from. And so my main work is working with performers of all types. So I have long distance runners, I work with basketball players, I work with musicians, I work with actors, a whole writers, a whole range of people who are performers, and they come to me essentially saying, I'm blocked, something's going wrong for me, I'm not at my peak potential, can you help me with that?
Okay.
Mm.
Um, and I guess the next question's sort of relaying back to that and how you like your interest and your history of working with performers. Sort
Mm.
of like obviously you relate to your own experience. So how did that kind
Mm.
of propel you forward to get to where you are
Mm. Mm. So I was treated very much as a sort of prodigious musician. I started playing music when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And then at 10 was sort of then guided into the class music of, the world of classical music training.
now?
Um, as a small, so I went from being this small child that nobody could even take the flute out of my hand. It's just like my absolute, joy, and yeah, I felt I could communicate more through music, I think maybe through words.
Yeah.
And anybody asked me to play anything, I'd be so excited about playing. And I went from that to at 18 years old, just seeing the instrument, having panic attacks,
Wow.
and then developed something that's called focal dystonia. In the sports world, it's often called the yips,
Yeah.
which is a movement disorder. So my body just wouldn't respond. And in my case, it was the corners of my mouth suddenly lost all strength and the air would just escape. So, as a wind instrument player, you have to be able to perfectly direct the air through the instrument. And
Yeah.
if you can't do that, I mean, it was literally game over. I could not get a note out of the instrument. Um, and I mean, it created, it was very confusing for me at the time, also created an extraordinary amount of grief for me. And it just was sort of took a different, accepted it, took a different route, did a science degree. And then I ended up working. So look back at my life and I go, it's so funny. I mean, I ended up working for a bank.
Okay.
Um, and I got involved with the bank in a strategic planning project. So they'd done a 10-year strategic plan and they wanted to work out, well, how do we get, it's people that make the plan, the financial plan, achieve that plan or not. How do
Yeah.
we get, I mean, this is sort of banking language, how do we get people to do what we need them to do in order for this plan to be realized?
Hmm.
Um, and so I started to, this is really before the world of coaching. I mean, the term coaching in terms outside of the sports world, in terms of mental coaching or emotional coaching or life coaching or business coaching, none of that was existing at that point,
Yeah.
or had existed at that point. And but I started to develop this and started to talk with the bank executive. So I think that this is something that we could be creating.
Yeah.
And it was very much at that point about senior management performance. And I guess that I'd sort of had there's this inner, I this inner kind of need to know what went wrong. What is it that stops us performing? Just from my own personal experience. So the bank was amazing. They sent me to study with all sorts of people,
Wow.
from neuroscientists through to creativity gurus. So, I just studied with enormous amounts of people and put a coaching program together for them. the senior managers.
Yeah.
And then sort of delivered that program and worked with that for a number of years. And it just happened to be that through a colleague in the bank, you know, he was working with athletes, and he said to me, this weird stuff that you're doing with those people, do you think that might work with athletes as well?
I
And I
love
was
the
like, well,
weird stuff.
so well, yeah, you know, let's go back 30 years. Like, all
Yeah.
this stuff was
Yeah.
really weird back then. So I was like, well, yeah, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And just and it has just continued to develop from there. So the whole time, every time I would work with somebody and I go, I don't know how to, you know, I don't have the tools to help this person, I would then go away and find someone who did have the tools for that. And so I've just been through this myself, a continuous learning process of learning new techniques, learning new ideas, more about neuroscience, more about, you know, the body brain coordination, body brain connections. How can we change that? So I've just been myself on a continuous education journey through through this whole of the last 30 years that I've been working with this.
Yeah. That's incredible,
Mm.
really, to come from sort of that beginning point and I
Mm.
guess being almost like right place, right time in the investment, and that they could
Yeah,
see the potential and the way that it was channeled in terms of like, high performers within a work environment, and then it, yeah, just growing out and becoming where it is now is, yeah, that's incredible. It's really
yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And it really did feel like that, like being in the right place at the right time over and over and again. You know,
Yeah.
so one of the things that happened was that I worked with one of the Premier League basketball teams here in Spain where I live.
Yeah.
And a musician from one of the Superior Conservatoire of Music follows this team and had seen some of the results that were happening with the players, and
Hmm.
he asked me to give a masterclass for musicians. And I was like, sure, you know, I'm always up for, you know, exploring, and when I just think it's so exciting. So I gave this masterclass, and I was talking about a particular movement disorder that one of the basketball players had. It was focal dystonia. It was the yips in his foot.
Yeah.
And I was talking in the class about how we'd resolve that. And one of the teachers afterwards came up to me and said, you know, I have something very similar. I don't have it in my foot, I have it in my mouth. Do you think you could work with me? And I was like, sure. You know, so we did the same work with him, which went really well. And then he said to me, this is called, in the world of music, it's called musicians dystonia, focal dystonia. Look it up. You know, people say this is incurable, and you've just cured me.
Yeah.
You know, do more of this. As I looked it up, went, that's what happened to me when I was 18 years old. That
Hmm.
was undiagnostic. You know, there wasn't a diagnostic for it at the time.
Yeah.
And so I just went, okay, so, you know, I'd been, whatever point that was, 25 years or more, actually, probably nearly 30 years since I had picked up a musical instrument. And it was like, wow, I could actually come back and play music again.
Yeah.
And so I did the work on myself, and, you know, and I am now back to playing
Oh,
flute at a really, you know, quite proficient level. I mean, there's a lot still to learn because that's a short period of time that I've been playing for, but,
yeah.
you know, at a pretty proficient level as a result. And it's just like, as you say, it feels like everything's just dropped into the right place at the right time.
Yeah. That's incredible. I was
Mm,
going to
mm,
ask, yeah, like, did you sort of like come back? Were you able to play again? And like you say, a lot of the work, like I've been through the book Free to Perform,
mm,
and a lot of it is, like you say, it is work that people do have to do on themselves. It's things that they have to do. Like you can help them and guide them, but it is very sort of, I describe it as like internal work that goes on, would you say?
mm. Yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think just to be able to understand it at its most simple basis, I mean, it's more complex than this, but if we were to understand its most simple basis, what our natural state is to feel like really solid and secure
Yeah.
and confident internally. And yet for many of us, we lost that inner feeling because as very small children, we weren't, and we were really defenseless. Small children, we are defenseless. So
Yeah.
if I didn't feel enough sort of holding and connection and unconditional love actually as well from my parents, then somehow that natural sense of inner security and stability has just gets kind of washed away or diluted out.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember being at secondary school and being really amazed how some people just were sort of calm and confident and,
Mhm.
you know, just naturally just felt these really solid internal experience of life.
Yeah.
And I realized that I didn't feel that. I had this doubt, constant doubt going on. It's almost like this sort of crack that things could fall
Yeah.
down into. And so when we go to perform, that just becomes amplified.
Okay.
And then in our learning of whatever it is, if it's a musical instrument or if it's a sport, and there's this extraordinary technical ability that we need, which takes many, many hours of practice. And we just find that we start unknowingly, the way we practice then further embeds that doubt. So
Yeah.
we practice, over practice. We feel like we need to try hard, or we need to kind of push through, be strong. We become very perfectionistic, not being able to allow mistakes. We become kind of rigid, tight in the mind, tight in, and therefore tight in the body.
Yeah.
And so actually by the time the performance issues are arising, there's probably many years, if not a whole lifetime, of sort of something that's become tightly wound inside of us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where the internal work to unwind all of that and to
Yeah.
really come back to have an internal sense of being really solid and secure inside,
Hmm.
is what we're looking to do.
So with that, could you tell me how, like, I think probably kind of summarize, if you could, to begin with, the conceptual framework for the
Mm,
free to perform model and what it actually is, and then
mm,
probably just a bit more about how you came to sort of like, yeah, get the framework and how it was sort of like, okay, so for this, this needs to happen first, and then we go to here to get that unwinding.
mm, mm. So we can think of the framework as being sort of in 4 stages, and it looks like it would be stage 1, stage, it's like we would do them chronologically.
Yeah.
There is that, but in reality, there's quite a lot of overlapping that happens, and things quite naturally come up at different points in that. But it's helpful, I think, in order to understand what this is all about, to think of them as 4 separate stages.
Yeah.
Okay. So our first stage is to come back to knowing what's going on for ourselves.
Hmm.
Okay. What do I mean by that? We have this thing that's called a sensory gate. So most of the information that our nervous system is constantly receiving is gated out.
Hmm.
So the nervous system is receiving about 11 million bits of sensorial information per second, and we are only consciously aware of about 60
Okay.
bits of that. Okay. The rest is gated out.
Okay.
Okay. And it's gated out so we don't become overwhelmed. Can you imagine if you were actually being consciously aware of 11 million
I
bits
think
of information every second?
yeah, you'd just
You
be
couldn't
wandering around in
function.
a daze, wouldn't you? You'd just be like, oh my, everything all at once. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. You just couldn't function. So it gets blocked out. But also things that experiences, sensations that are uncomfortable or unbalancing for us also get gated out as part of the not becoming overwhelmed.
Okay.
So actually, most of us aren't even necessarily aware of what's going on in our body all of the time.
Yeah.
So if I was, somebody will come to me quite often and say, well, I have performance anxiety. And I would say to them, you tell me about it. And they'll be able to describe very easily the sort of mental aspect of it. And my mind races and I can't concentrate on this and I can't concentrate on this. And they might be able to talk about some of the physiological things like my heart starts to beat race and beat really
Yeah.
fast or really strong. But most of what's actually going on in their body in relation to the performance anxiety, they can't tell me
Yeah.
because it's gated out.
Yeah.
So the first stage is to start bringing down the sensory gate and start to become really aware of everything that is going on around the anxiety.
Okay.
Okay. So that's our first stage, and then that will feed in later on to be able to work with it. Then our second phase is to start to rebuild this sense of safety and security into the body.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually we can learn to step into flow. You know, this amazing concept of flow where mind, emotions, and body are kind of in unity, and we're just completely present for the here and now, in the
Yeah.
here and now. We can develop that. We actually develop it through the body, not through the mind.
Okay.
So there are particular centers in the body that as we connect into those centers, we literally come into the here and now.
Yeah.
The body relaxes. There's this sense of security, confidence. And there's also a sense of, at the same time, fluidity and openness.
Yeah.
Okay. So I start teaching people how to do that in the second phase and how to connect to that for themselves. Then the third phase, I think, is probably maybe the biggest and the longest part, which is where we've now got that we're really set up to do some really deep work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really aware of what goes on for me when I'm out of flow. And I also know what it feels like to be in flow. So I have this perfect comparison. And then we use a tool called Brainspotting. Brainspotting was developed by an American psychologist called David Grand. It's a neurophysiological, neuroexperiential technique that connects the body and the brain together. And through eye positions, it helps the nervous system unwind what's got caught up and stuck.
Yeah.
Okay. So in our third phase, we're using Brainspotting to go, okay, I'm so aware now of what's got wound up inside of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we use the Brainspotting to unwind it. So then we get to a point where actually there's very little anxiety left. There's very little of the pushing, the rigidity, all those unhealthy patterns. I mean, they're adaptations we've made in order to be as functional as we can.
Yeah.
But those all start to get unwound. And then we find, well, I can be in flow whenever I want. And then we get into our fourth phase, is where we actually take that into not only into competitions, but we take it into developing our technical skills.
Okay.
Because the brain is associative. So if I practice with my body constricted because I'm feeling under pressure, that pressure is literally wired into that technical movement.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if we were to practice in flow becomes wired into the technical movement.
Yeah.
Which means that then when I'm in competing or I'm on stage, which is where there is this extraordinary pressure,
Mm-hmm.
the flow is so embedded that it just comes out despite the pressure being there.
Yeah. But it is like you say, if you associate certain feelings with certain like physical movements, then it is like, I know if I guess to like relate it back, when I used to compete in jujitsu, when I used to stand there by the side of the mat waiting to go on and I'd have all these nerves going on, I had to start thinking things like I would force myself to smile and I'd be telling myself,
Yeah.
you're excited, this is good. Like rather than feeling the fear, I was like, no, you need to like reframe it. Um,
Yes.
so I guess it is like that. And then it became easier then for me to go, right, okay, I'm back here again. I've been here before, and this is how
Yeah.
it will feel, which is what you're doing, really, isn't it? You're, like you say, unwinding everything and reframing it and helping the brain uncondition itself to what it thinks it should be doing and feeling, and the body as well.
Yes. Yeah. And the body and brain are completely connected.
Mm,
So what's in the brain is in the body, and what's in the body is in the brain.
yeah,
This is really important to remember, because so much of what's happened around, certainly I think within sports psychology, but I think in general around performance, is all about doing mental work, visualizations, which aren't, they have their place and they're really valuable,
yeah,
but they don't get to the body. And most of this is happening body upwards.
yeah.
So we need to get to the body and work through there.
I think as well, it's like you say, there's still the visualization and there's still certain aspects, but they're almost now like from how I personally see it, I guess, is they're more like tools. They're tools that people can have in their, you know,
Mm.
their toolkit to go, this will help me with this and this will help me with this, and almost like a bit of like say with CBT, I see that as a tool now. I don't see it as being
Mm.
something that is a not a cure, um, but it's something almost to fall back on. But you have to do that work first for something like that to be efficient and for it to be effective to work once you've undone all of everything that it needs to be undone.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise, this sort of the body, or the subcortical brain, which is tied into the body, and we don't have conscious access to that.
mm,
Now that's doing this constant scanning of the environment to say, is this safe? Is it dangerous? Is it safe or is it dangerous? And we can sort of imagine that the nervous system is almost like riding down a hill on a bicycle with the brakes on.
yeah,
Okay, so the nervous system feels calm because the brakes are on. The bike's under control because the brakes are on. But as soon as something through this process called neuroception, which is happening at this 11 million bits of information per second,
yeah,
as soon as that goes, that's dangerous, or I'm under threat with that, or this isn't going to go well, or oh no, look who the judge is, or whatever that might be,
yeah,
it's suddenly like the brakes are let off. And so the bike then is hurtling down the hill and there's no way of bringing it back under control again.
yeah,
And that's often what is literally happening in the body, because the body and the subcortical brain is holding memories that where they're going, that's really not a safe place to be.
yeah,
And so if something happens that reminds us of that, then all control is lost, and something like visualization or CBT doesn't have the power to pull the brakes back on again.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so from, oh, sorry, one moment. So from sort of where you started in the bank,
Mm.
being given this sort of like, right, let's go for this, let's see what happens here.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
actually having the framework and knowing these four phases now, how did you kind of get from, yeah, your beginnings to having this framework that you
Mm.
now refer
Mm.
to and, we know, we know works absolute miracles for people?
Mm. It's been as I said, it's been a long process. For me to do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of learning. I mean, I don't know how many courses, how much money I've spent on my own
Yeah,
training and learning, and just above anything, just being really attuned to the people that I've been working with, and just really trying to understand what's going on for them, and finding things that would help resolve that. I mean, that's been my approach since the beginning.
yeah,
I think there were some very key things that happened for me. One was many, right back then, I read the book called Flow. I
yeah.
can never pronounce the guy's name. And that really impacted on me, that
Hmm.
this is possible. So
Yeah.
that's been going on for a long time. This is possible. I need to find the way how to do this and how to do it consistently.
Yeah.
Not it just be something, well, all of a sudden, every now and again, the stars line up and we enter into flow. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, we need to be able to do that on demand.
Yeah.
I also studied and then studied to become a teacher in a type of yoga called Kundalini yoga.
Okay.
And Kundalini yoga is very body based,
Yeah.
and it's also very much around the nervous system. So it's about how to use the body and centers in the body to enable the nervous system to come into safety.
Yeah.
I learned so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
That was where I found out that there are these centers in the body, and that when you can connect into them,
Yeah.
and really turn your mental attention into the body feeling, that the flow state just spontaneously arises out of that.
Yeah.
So that came out of my Kundalini yoga studies.
Okay.
And then I came across Brainspotting. Brainspotting was an absolute game changer for
Yeah.
me, because what I found with Brainspotting was that these other experiences that people are having, there is a tool here to help unwind that.
Yeah.
Not just to sort of try and keep it at bay, which we were talking about before with this
Yeah.
idea of the bicycle. It's not
Yeah.
about something that can keep the brakes on, but actually something that can take out of the system this feeling of hurtling down the hill.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the piece that Brainspotting gave me. And then Brainspotting gave me so much. I mean, I could talk for hours about it. But one of the other, I think, really key things that I understood from Brainspotting is that 85% of our neural connections are body up to the brain, and only 15% is coming from the brain down to the body.
Yeah.
So it really brought home how limited working with the mind is in terms of resolving this, because this is being held, our access to where this is being held in the nervous system is through the body.
Yeah.
So then Brainspotting was the other really big piece on that. And then I think my own experience of then going through my own process
Mm-hmm.
to come back to really be able to heal and come back to be able to play music.
Yeah.
And then learning how to play music, and this kind of wiring in, embedding in a different way,
Yeah.
the technical skills, I think added the other really big piece to that.
Yeah. On that, do you feel like since you've come back and you're able to play again, do you feel that the way that you learn now feels, it might not be because it was obviously you were a child, like, but do you feel different in your learning now? Is it,
Yeah,
do you know
totally.
what I mean? Yeah.
Completely different. So, you know, I mean, I talk in Free to Perform about these 5 gifts that we have that enable us to become amazing performers.
Mm-hmm.
But that because of that base feeling of insecurity, they become distorted, they become adapted into things that actually aren't helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I give an example of that with my own way that I learned as a child and the way that I learn now,
Yeah.
an example would be, I mean, in order for the body to have the degree of coordination that's required to play a musical instrument, and in many other fields of performance as well,
Mm-hmm.
that's literally hours and hours and hours of practice, going over these same movements over and over again until they're really hardwired into the brain.
Yeah.
Now, what I'd have been doing before would be this kind of, with a lot of mental tension, would be, I have to do this practice. Oh no, it's not good enough. It's not, I can't play it fast enough. It's and all this kind of real tension and rigidity. It's like my motivation or my discipline was coming out of this really driven place.
Yeah.
Whereas now I have the same level of discipline, Probably more, actually. I can probably spend longer going over the same phrases and the same movements,
Yeah.
but it's just playful and joyful. And I'm just curious that, oh, okay, so that's what that feels like when I do that. And this is what this feels like. And it's just curious and joyful and fun. And the motivation comes not that I've got to get this right, but just this recognition of, if I do this enough, then it's going to get me to somewhere I want to go to. So there's this sort of really positive.
Yeah.
Often I think, I think before I had a negative mind view, it's like I need to practice this so I don't make mistakes, so I don't get it wrong, so I
Yeah.
don't lose. Whereas now it's much more this sort of positive vision of something that I really want to create, and
Yeah.
that this is going to help me create this thing that's really beautiful and joyful
Yeah.
for me. So that would, I mean, then, and there's that many other examples. But I suppose if we were going to summarize all these different examples, it's like, whereas before, I think I could describe my body as feeling sort of very compact, probably quite constricted,
Hmm.
sideways, back to front. It's like there was like this sort of compact, constricted sense. My mind was rigid as well and quite constricted. Whereas now everything feels really expansive and soft and playful and spontaneous.
Yeah.
And it was like undoing this idea that trying hard and being focused on something also means being sort of rigid and driven about it. It's actually,
Yeah.
I can be disciplined, and I can have a real eye for detail, but I don't have to have all this rigidity and perfectionism and sort of negativity and tension around it. It can be
Yeah.
soft and joyful.
And I think like when it comes to athletes, a lot of the time that is something that's ingrained on them even from their coaches as well. Like there's this whole mental toughness thing, isn't there? There's, oh, you just need to try harder, you just need to do better. Why can't you do this? You should be able to do this. And that instills that, well, yeah, why can't I do it? I must be better. I must just keep doing it,
Yeah.
rather than, like you say, going back to that base of, if they had that secure feeling inside, that they would just be like, well, it's just a bad day. Yeah, I've just,
Mm,
and
mm.
have that more, like you say, be more open to it and not so rigid.
Yes. Yeah. And we get into more of a, instead of going, it's not working because you're doing something wrong, we get into this much more exploratory sense of, okay, let's find out what's falling over here,
Yeah.
resolve that, and then it will go right. And that's a very, very different mindset.
Okay, so now we can see how you developed the model, where you started from, and your own experiences. What do you see? What's your vision for the future, and where do you see free to perform
Mm,
and flow? Where do you see that going?
mm, mm. I I think it's quite, I think it's a very new concept for a lot of people.
Hmm.
um, it's a new concept to understand that this isn't a mental process, it's a body process that then feeds up to the neural networks, and the neural networks change and can, they can be rewired, and then the experience is different.
Yeah.
So I think for the future, I think a lot of my task right now is educational, just to keep really telling people about it, explaining what this is, giving people the science
Yeah.
of it. Um, I think the big shift will come if coaches and teachers could really get on board with this.
Yeah.
Because I think there's one thing that me as a student or me as an athlete going, okay, I want to work on my own performance and I'm going to use this model. And there's so much that they can do, as an individual, there's so much that we can do in order to be able to, really be at our best.
Yeah.
If my coach understands that too and can coach me in this different way,
Hmm.
so much, I think that we have really underestimated how much the relational environment that we are in impacts our performance.
Yeah.
and I know, I mean, we all know that. I mean, I think that there's a kind of reflection I give it early on in one of my books, which says, when you're around people who, you know, are warm and positive to you, you just feel really like, okay to be yourself with. How does that feel on the inside?
Yeah,
And when you're with somebody who you feel is judging you, or is looking for your mistakes, or might say something, pull you up, call you out, how does
yeah,
that feel on the inside? And
yeah.
then if we connect with how that feels on the inside, and then we feel, so how do we can really go into detail? How do the tips of my fingers feel?
Hmm.
How do my shoulders feel? How much flexibility do I have in my body?
Yeah,
How much energy do I have in my body? When we start to really connect into that, we start to go, of course, that's going to diminish my ability to perform.
yeah,
And so, so it's for the future for me, it's to continue working with the performers themselves, and I'm teaching brain spotting, other brain spotting therapists as well, how to use this approach, how to use this model. I have a group of people that I'm working 6 months with them to develop them. Hopefully there's another group in the States that will begin next year as well. So training others, so this can go out. There are other people that can work with athletes.
hmm,
um, and then I think that for me to free me up then to be able to work more also at a systemic level and with coaches. I have another book that I've just started with the aim for that to go out next year. And as if that wasn't enough, I'm starting a research master's in February so that we can actually
oh,
really get some very, very good scientific data around this to show what's happening and how it works and the way it works. And I'm really excited about that because one of my tutors is a developmental psychologist, so he really understands all the relational part. And my other tutor is a neuropsychologist, so she really understands actually this at much more of a neurophysiological level and
yeah,
not just at the emotional and social level. So yeah.
yeah. That's really good because I think one thing we found is when I've obviously been working with Martin, when he's looking for papers and research, especially around brain spotting and things, it's really difficult to find
Yeah.
anything that you can actually take and, like you say, to the coaching community, to the teaching community, and say, look, here's the paper, this is showing you this is the effect, giving them something in front of them, because I think so many of them are still, they want that proof, don't they? They want that evidence. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, to know that you're going to be doing that and actually bringing it
Mm,
into the forefront more within that community, I think is really
mm,
important to
mm,
moving it forward as well.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I just think we suffer that, the bottom line of this is there's so much suffering,
Yeah,
as performers, wherever that is across the globe, the majority of performers are suffering.
mhm,
And the suffering feels like it's something that's out of their ability to be able to do anything about.
yeah,
And if I can do anything that to change that,
yeah.
then I think that's, time, like a life well spent.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree.
Mm,
I think it's
mm,
amazing what you've done, and hearing like feedback and seeing some of the feedback that you've had from performers that you've worked with is just, yeah, it's to hear them and to, for them to be
mm,
saying like, she cured me, she took this away or helped me work through it to make this go away, and now I
mm,
feel able to do everything to the best that I absolutely can. I think that's such a gift to give
mm,
people.
mm, mm. Thank you. Thank you.
Um, I did have one question, uh,
Mm,
and I wondered around, when you're kind of asking people to relate back to you how they're feeling things in their body, um,
mm.
like you might see, like you said, referring to like the fingertips, like how did that feel? Do you sometimes struggle with people being able to connect to that part and actually be able to, it's almost like it's blocked off from them and they can't? all they can think of is, well, I felt anxious, and they can't feel the physical side of things.
Yes, that's really common. That's why the first part of the work is this. I call it the attunement repair exercise, this first phase, where literally I'm asking people to come back to the body, and
Yeah.
so they're noticing what they can feel readily and easily in the body, but they're also noticing what they can't feel.
Okay. Yeah.
And we do, then we can do, so when there are, where there are very specific gaps of awareness, we can do some brain spotting on that,
Yeah.
and that will come back online.
Okay.
It's a really important part of the work.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you very
Great.
much. It's been lovely to
You're
speak to you.
welcome. It's been likewise.
Really good.